Starting off at number 10, we're looking at the films that made us laugh. And thankfully, there were a fair few. We had cute, if not groundbreaking, animated entries from both Disney and Pixar, which charmed in exactly the same way they always do. Wes Anderson took an extra-strength dose of pastel pills and delivered us an anthology of thrice-distilled idiosyncrasy that was, predictably, delightful. While Paul Thomas Anderson combined Philip Seymour Hoffman's Air with literally the entire Haim family in a loosely structured hangout movie that may not have been his best but was his most fun in Licorice Pizza. Plan B was a hysterical sex comedy romp in the vein of Superbad and Booksmart, and Shiva Baby was hilarious but also crazy stressful. But our favorite comedy of the year, and surely the hardest to pin down, was an adaptation of a Twitter thread of all things. We are talking here, of course, about Zola.
Hey. Last month, I went dancing at this cute spot in Florida where my roommate's girl made like 5 G's a night. My roommate just told me that he going out there tomorrow, and he asked me if I had any friends that want to make some money, and you the first bitch I thought of.
Damn, bitch. We just met yesterday and you already trying to take hoe trips together? When we leaving?
Adapted from an absolutely hysterical series of 148 tweets about why Asia King and this bitch here fell out, Zola captures the raw, audacious, very online energy of its source material in a saga about 2 strippers heading to Florida to dance together that goes very, very awry. While sporting obvious visual shades of Spring Breakers and The Florida Project, Janixa Bravo's sophomore feature is contemporary in a way even those films are not, truly reflecting the manic energy of a generation that grew up online in both admiration and critique. It's an absolutely insane tale that's as tense as it is funny. But if that's not enough to convince you of its worth, let us not fail to mention that it includes Greg from Succession rapping Hannah Montana by Migos. So, there's that.
Hannah Montana! Hannah Montana! Hannah Montana! Hannah Montana!
In our next 2 slots, we're looking at the blockbusters. And here too, 2021 came back with a fury. This year, we got a couple big-ticket musicals that took sharp melodic tugs upon our heartstrings in the form of In the Heights and West Side Story. James Bond took big risks, delivered a couple stellar action set pieces, and plunged into the deep unknown while stumbling on a few of the fundamentals. And Marvel began its next series in earnest, impressing us with Black Widow, Shang-Chi, and especially our number 9 pick, Spider-Man No Way Home. However, even Marvel is overshadowed by this year's behemoth hype machine, and rightly so. Our number 8 pick, Dune.
What's in the box?
Pain.
Nice knowing you, Spider-Man.
Wait, excuse me?
In No Way Home, our live-action Spider-Man took a page from animated Miles Morales' book and found himself faced not with foes from across the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but the ghosts of Spider-Man villains past. With a few very satisfying surprises that were both original and amazing, retconning in former versions of the Spider-Man saga as the MCU's Phase 4 continued its build-out into the multiverse, and honestly, it was a blast. Beyond its multi-dimensionality, there was nothing particularly revolutionary about No Way Home, but then again, it wasn't aiming for groundbreaking. Instead, it was exactly the kind of genre-spanning treat the entire world has come to know and love pretty much every single time out from Marvel Studios. There's a little comedy, a little drama, some romance, some action, great villains, a clear hero, morals and messages, and stakes and excitement and emotions and constant entertainment from start to finish. It's the latest entry into the world's most expensive and ambitious serial storyline ever told. So yeah, we like experimental cinema, but we like comfort food too. And there's nothing quite as comforting as the heroes we've come to know and love, saving the universe one more time. But then, there was Dune. Remaking Frank Herbert's far future saga of galactic colonialism, thundering across all the big screens and the loudest sound system since late October, this sci-fi epic Part 1 operated at a magnitude like little else. The sense of scale was nothing short of gargantuan, and the universe building that it served felt wholly realized and wholly real. The visual effects were essentially perfect, integrating into actual footage without a single seam showing, and they made for the easiest fantasy world to get fully lost in since perhaps Lord of the Rings. The resulting world looked and sounded utterly celestial. The sound, in large part thanks to Hans Zimmer channeling the late Johann Johansson to fantastic effect. From the very first moments of the film, Denis Villeneuve continued to prove that he directs sequences unlike anyone else working today, bending space and time and all the techniques of cinema together into a multi-sensory emotional experience that was, in each 10 to 20 minute span of time, something utterly new. And while he has occasionally stumbled in the past at tying all his sequences together into a satisfying ending, here it was all upside, setup, and promise. An entirely new world wherein we can dream his unique brand of future. Next up at number 7, we take a brief interlude from fiction films for documentaries. Elizabeth Chai Vasarhelyi and Jimmy Chin continued their run of pulse-pounding doc thrillers, chronicling real-life man versus nature struggles with their take on the rescue of the Thai soccer team in The Rescue. Roadrunner gave us a peek into the behind-the-camera life of Anthony Bourdain. The Dissident looked at...
As I could see, it was just black people. This was the first time I'd ever seen so many of us. It was incredible.
Roots drummer Amir Questlove Thompson made his directorial debut with this impressive documentary recounting the story of a massive, life-changing festival with a mind-blowing lineup in the summer of '69. This was the Harlem Cultural Festival, and Questlove set out this year not to rewrite the record, but to finally just write it for the first time. Filled with concert footage of stunningly high quality, key interviews with all the biggest players, and a sense of not just musical but also cultural revolution, the Summer of Soul, or When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised, looks back at and re-energizes a vitally important cultural moment that has been bowdlerized by uneven coverage. The result is not just an important historical document of the joyful side of a cultural moment, but a damn good time. If 2021 was an outlier in terms of music docs, it was a veritable banner year for period pieces. Our next 2 slots are set aside for them, and honestly, they almost took up 3. Kenneth Branagh is making Oscar waves with his rather sentimental Belfast. Paul Verhoeven asked us what if, the Bible was way more sexy than it already obviously is in Benedetta. King Richard rendered the Williams sisters' upbringing in Shakespearean mode. Judas and the Black Messiah came out this year, although you'd be forgiven if it felt like forever ago. 2021's been a long one, but we can't forget this moving tale of power and sabotage in the civil rights era. While Sardar Udham gives us a nuanced, human, non-linear look at the life of a 1940s freedom fighter, The Last Duel is Ridley Scott proving he still goddamn has it in medieval Rashomon, sporting exceptional performances from both Jodie Comer and, surprisingly, Ben Affleck, with maybe his best role and worst facial hair in decades, but it just misses our list in favor of our number 6 pick, the hypnotic Arthurian riddle of the Green Knight.
O greatest of kings, indulge me in this friendly Christmas game. Let whichever of your knights is boldest of blood and wildest of hearts step forth, take up arms, and try with honor to land a blow against me.
However, even the Green Knight cannot match the unparalleled brilliance and majesty of our number 5 pick, Jane Campion's utterly astonishing The Power of the Dog.
I wonder what little lady made these.
Actually, I did, sir. My mother was a florist, so I made them to look like the ones in our garden.
Oh, well, do pardon me.
There is an overwhelmingly surreal quality to David Lowery's adaptation of the Arthurian legend of Gawain, telling the tale of a young knight in search of a heroism he does not yet possess, like that of a truth that swims in and out of focus, dancing beyond our grasp. This is not your traditional sword and sorcery epic, resplendent with pitched battles and acts of glory, and Arthur, Guinevere, Mordred, and Gawain are not your parents' knights in shining armor, clear bastions of strength, of good and evil. They, like the rest of the Green Knight, are alive with contradictions that the film refuses to even attempt to resolve. Dreamlike, psychological, often non-verbal. It folds in on itself like 1,000 years of retellings all at once, a tale reshaped 1,000 times for different ends, here laid out as all or none. It would be unwise to go in expecting a tidy ending, but if you came prepared for a fever dream, you were sure to leave enchanted. The Power of the Dog, Jane Campion's story of 2 brothers bucking at their natures in the twilight years of the Wild West, and the mother and son who disrupt their dynamic, trades in a different kind of open-endedness. Every single one of the most important answers are there and not a single one extra. There is a cut-to-the-bone efficiency to Jane Campion's minimalism when it comes to narrative, saving space for a depth of psychological richness and sensuality in its place. Jonny Greenwood's score is a literal masterpiece with melodies that will haunt you long after the credits roll, and Campion has long proven herself the master of frontiers, places where the concepts of masculinity and femininity meet at their fringes, and here is hardly the exception, finding the latent eroticism of the cowboy lifestyle much like Claire Denis did with Soldiers in Beau Travail. She finds stunning beauty at the extremes of her camera lens, both ultra-wide and ultra-tight, and wrangles an entire cast worth of brilliant performances even while some initially feel off. Our recommendation is to trust that uncanniness will reveal itself because Campion does not, in fact, make a single misstep in this slow-burn anti-western. We want to take a quick breath at number 4 and look at some of the great films we couldn't quite fit in other places on this list. We don't have a horror pick making it into our top 10 this year, but that doesn't mean there weren't some fascinating options. The minimalistic Lamb, the astonishingly detailed achievement of Mad God. We have very mixed feelings about Titane, but it is certainly an exceptionally well-crafted film, if not always a likable one, and we don't think this cinematic year in review is complete without a mention of it. As far as thrillers go, it's hard not to be impressed by both Nick Cage's and the filmmaker's restraint in Pig, or the anxiety-inducing Kitchen Confidential tension of Boiling Point. And there are a couple of films we weren't able to get our hands on in time to write this list. The Tragedy of Macbeth eluded us, although it's probably available in theaters now as you're watching. And we weren't able to make a screening of Memoria, one of our most anticipated films of the year, but nobody else will have a chance to see it until next year either, so we figure it hardly counts. But at the top of our grab bag, we have an animated film, the final finale to a very long string of finales, Hideaki Anno's capstone to the Evangelion epic Thrice Upon a Time. Over 25 years ago, Hideaki Anno revolutionized Japanese animation forever with his Neon Genesis Evangelion series, combining the deeply personal with the massively existential in a genre-expanding epic of battling mecha kaiju, but the ending was dense. From there, Anno remade the ending in feature film form to much greater success and truly deserved critical acclaim. And then he continued his battle with one of anime's most fascinating narratives with the rebuild of Evangelion series that saw the same story retold from a new angle to mixed success. And this year, he has offered a third and utterly final ending. The result is not just an example of a great work finding a fitting conclusion, but of a brilliant, if historically tortured creator wrestling with himself and his own concept of finality and finally finding a way to make peace with saying goodbye. For our last 3 picks, we have but one category: the broad, boring catch-all of drama. But oh, what a year it has been for good drama. From Spencer to The Card Counter, from Coda to Uni, Lin-Manuel Miranda behind the camera in Tick, Tick, Boom, Molly Wood's The Disciple, Rebecca Hall's Passing, the multi-layered Bergman Island, and our top 3 picks in order: Souvenir Part 2, Drive My Car, and Come On, Come On.
Patrick! Hi. Hi. How are you?
I am middling. How are you?
Yeah, middling as well.
Like Evangelion, The Souvenir Part 2 is another sequel that sees a narrative turning further inwards rather than expanding out. In 2019, Joanna Hogg gave us the semi-autobiographical tale of Julie, a film student who finds herself in love with a heroin addict, a searingly honest take on all the best and worst parts of the binding power of love. But this year, she dissects herself even further, examining herself in a state of examination, as she follows Julie grappling with her own story of love and loss as she attempts to turn it into her own film. That is to say, Julie and Joanna's stories don't end at their endings but continue onwards in art and memory. And The Souvenir Part 2 is the story of that. And what sounds like a self-referential recipe for dreary navel-gazing turns out to be something far more insightful, more profound, and more moving than even the thing itself.
今回は私たちの決まりでドライバーを用意します。
というと、彼女です。
渡美咲です。
僕はまだドライバーを君に頼むことに同意してない。
A screenwriter sits up, half asleep, half entranced in the middle of the night and dictates the story of her dreams to her husband. In the morning, he tells it back to her so she can use it at work. Her husband, a theater director, puts on multilingual plays where actors cannot understand each other's words but must reach across the language barrier to communicate nonetheless. She records for him an entire play with his parts left out so that he can learn his lines. One day, she suddenly passes away. 2 years later, we find him driving through Japan at night, still in dialogue with her over those exact same lines. So passes the first 40 minutes of Drive My Car's prologue before the opening credits even roll. Simple, restrained, light on plot while heavy on emotional complexity, the film slowly steers its way into the kind of grief-stricken quagmire that often makes up the shape of a life in the shadow of messy tragedy.